It's strange, for the ego mind, there is nothing beyond its own thoughts that arise, and it assumes that those thoughts are simply productions of its own level of intelligence. And yet we're all aware that sometimes your thoughts don't simply come from the conscious mind and are predictable responses or reactions that are constituted by the egoic algorithms that are repetitive and that are clearly indicia of the persona that you have represented yourself as being, and patterns and habits of desire and aversion and of ways of moving into the world with particular intentions. But you also know that there are other times when that level of consciousness seems to open up, as if the floor gives way and one falls into states in which the subconscious shadow emerges, and one feels emotions and thoughts that create often unbearable and painful states of consciousness. And that can include shame, guilt, anxiety, despair, horror, loneliness, all of the feelings that people tend to want to avoid and defend against, but that suddenly when one falls into that lower level of subconscious maya that the ego carries until its nigredo has been worked through and transformed, and the consciousness rises from the ego level itself, becomes a kind of implicit requirement of remaining with the ego defenses that serve to separate oneself from the shadow. How many people have had that experience? Okay. Now, there are other times when perhaps you're in a creative mode of being, or you're in an unfamiliar situation and the ego patterns break through, or perhaps you are trying to create a work of art, a painting, a poem, a new song, and you're able to clear away the kinds of ordinary cliche sort of thoughts, or let's say images that one would want to project as a matter of sustaining that ego's pattern of aspiration and of limitation. And suddenly you receive an inspiring and inspired download, and you find a poem is being written that you're not writing, it's coming through. Or your hand is painting a picture that you didn't even think that you were going to create, but it's as if it's creating itself from a power that is moving you. Or some new kind of music, or some new kind of dance, or some kind of action in the world that's completely unconditioned and unpreconceived. How many have had that experience? Okay. I'm sure everyone has had it at some point. And what it shows is your thoughts can come either from the conscious, they can come from the subconscious, or they can come from the superconscious. When they come from the superconscious, they bring joy, beauty, they bring a joie de vivre, a love of life, they bring a sense of wonderment and a magical quality. And one can have supernormal synchronicities occur in such states, and precognitions, and all kinds of paranormal potentialities of consciousness become opened up. And so the intention of a yogi, certainly a Sat yogi, is to be so connected to that superconscious level that one is always receiving from it its creative intelligence that is capable of constantly organizing one's thoughts according to a higher order, according to the divine order, rather than the ego's own belief system and the shadow's own fear of the lack that will ensue if the ego loses control. So it's a giving up of control that doesn't fall into paranoia but rises into metanoia. It's a kind of absorption in what the Shaivite wisdom school of Kashmir, the Trika school, calls pratibha. Pratibha is the creative intelligence of God that's always being transmitted to the soul, but if one is in an unawakened state in the ego, one will not receive it. But if you are attuned to that level, which is also God's sense of humor, and the joy of the perfection of this entire theodrama in which we are participating and co-creating, that level of consciousness keeps one in constant fascination and joy and inspiration. And there's never a desert of feeling stuck or blocked or unable to create and to produce some novelty or be able to be equal to the demands of a challenge. But there will always be that capacity to be in a flow state, attuned to the Tao and the mind of God, and able to ride that wave through whatever situation one has to face. And to turn that into a Buddha field of the blossoming of the deep perception of the hidden beauty within every kind of event, regardless of how it might appear otherwise to an egoic consciousness that was projecting some kind of negativity or have some paranoid frame of reference that fears the unknown and the unknowable, and that which is alien to the ego's capacity to grasp. And you see, the whole problem with liberation and truth is that the ego has too small an information base to be able to make sense of the truth even when it is downloaded, because one doesn't have the full range of understanding to be able to connect all the dots that are being lit up for you because of glitches in one's own unification with the Absolute. Because one is stuck, if one is in the ego, in a fractal, limited version of oneself, one doesn't have access to the full range of resources available to our intelligence at the level of the real self in order to activate that pratibha, in order to translate it into art and wisdom and power and magic and all of the siddhis that are awakened and activated by that connection.